Welcome to another edition of the Juice and the Orange podcast, the place where every person is just a name until you know their story. And today we're delighted to have Valencia Maponya. Valencia, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Pastor, and I like to say gestoord. I'm doing well. And you?
I'm doing great. I'm delighted to hear your story and for others to hear it as well.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting
Yes, yes. So let's dive right in. Who is Valencia?
me. That's a very difficult question because I think Valencia is still trying to find out who is Valencia. Um, it's Valencia is under construction. I have lived through multiple ups and downs, peaks and valleys to where I am today. Um, there's there's an acronym I use to describe myself, and some people say what when I say it, but Valencia is fierce, and
Mm,
the fierce because simply because I live my life guided by my faith. I really am a believer in integrity in all that I do. Excellence, I don't think as a child of God you can go without excellence. I think that's what you must always strive to be excellent in what you do. But definitely you want to always have respect. And I'm a committed person. If I'm not only tasked, but for those, if I could interchange committed, it would be loyal too. I'm fiercely loyal. I'm that kind of person. And ultimately, I tell people I don't believe in equality, but I do believe in equity because I don't even think that the Bible has
mm,
equality. I think in life it's about, whether it's your one talent or your five talent, whatever talents you have, you use it well, but no one has the right to take it away from you. You have, but to ensure that you have a playing field that allows you to use your talent. So when I talk about myself in general, I say I'm fierce, and that's what I lead
mm.
my life by, and going, But in the simple terms, I'm Valencia. In this case, I attend the Church of the Oranges. I'm a mother of one boy who is almost out of the house, so I'm almost an empty nester in another year. Um,
Wow.
and I just, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. I am me. That's who you have.
Awesome, awesome. You heard it here first. She is Valencia Fierce. And so we're delighted to dive into your story. So can you tell us a little bit more about your roots, where you are from? Have you always lived in New Jersey?
No, funny. It's always circuitous in life as you go along. I proud to say I'm a born Jamaican. I originally from Jamaica. I grew up there. I went to high school there. Then I came here and I went to university here. After which I um, did, with university, I did some other traveling. I lived in South Africa for a little bit. Um, and then I went back to Jamaica, spent a number of years there, and then came back here in 2013. And subsequently, I've been here. But while I was here in the earlier days for university, I started here in New Jersey. Then I went to Connecticut. And then, as I said, I was I was teaching in South Africa for a little bit. And yeah, so the world is, I like to think it's a canvas. So I'm
Yeah,
a child of the world.
that is awesome. A globetrotter. So you started in Jamaica. Big up Jamaica, man.
Wake
So
up.
Jamaica, you all were repping hard for Kamala Harris, the VP.
Of
She has some
course.
Jamaican roots. So you all
Yes.
have Usain Bolt. So there's some
Yeah.
amazing Jamaicans who do some amazing things.
Yes.
So I'm
Definitely.
grateful that you are now in New Jersey, and you mentioned teaching in South Africa. What did you teach there?
I had the opportunity to teach life skills and English. It was fabulous. South Africa got it well, we would say independence, but it got out of apartheid in 1994. and I had
Mhm.
the opportunity to go there in 1999. And one of as any country that's developing and coming out of the history of what it's coming from, it has its own challenges. And I really got the opportunity to work at a school, which was a pilot project to look for children who were staying in the shelters. South Africa has a significant
Mm.
street children problem, coupled from, well, created from the high HIV rates and the high drug rates. So they have a number of children who are orphaned. So the government had a school specifically for behavioral issues, etc., coming from the shelters, and I had the opportunity to teach English and actually life skills there. So it was fabulous, and I actually still keep in touch with a few of them. So yeah, it was an experience.
Nice. That is awesome. So, Valencia, can you tell us about your spiritual journey or how you ended up at the Church of the Oranges?
Oh well, my spiritual journey. It's definitely one that I had to pause and reflect on when I thought about that question being possibly asked today. And we'll start chronologically backwards. So I got to Church of the Oranges in 2013, as I said. When I got here, my mom is a member of the Church of the Oranges, and my family actually was a big part of Church of the Oranges. So my aunt and my cousin Shanna and her brother Chase actually went to Pine Forge, and so it was kind of a natural. I got here. You go to Church of the Oranges because my mom and my aunt already goes to Church of the Oranges, that kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
prior to that, whenever I came, I would visit the Church of the Oranges. The vibrance, it's a large church. I'm coming from a large church in Jamaica, so it was almost like an equal fit. And it was where,
Mm.
Church of the Orange is the gold standard in our area. And back home, we were, Mount Salem SDA was like the gold standard in Montego Bay too. So it was kind of a very easy transition from there here. Um, to become part of the membership. Now, in terms of the spiritual journey, that's a whole nother thing. I one would say I could say I traditionally I grew up in an Adventist setting, an Adventist home or background. My grandfather was a deacon, and the whole Adventist story, as it is. However,
Mhm.
at some point I was not part of the Adventist church. At about age 7, my parents, my mom and my stepdad at the time, had decided to choose. We were always Seventh Day, but not Adventist. So we went over to
Mm.
the Worldwide Church of God, Herbert W. Armstrong. I don't know if anybody remembers those days, but so I spent from age 7 till about 22, so I think going to the Worldwide Church of God. So I've always been Advent. I mean, I've always been Seventh Day, but not always present. But because my family was so ingrained in the Adventism, uh, it was a natural back and forth. So if I didn't go to this church, I would go to that church. If I went to go for my grandparents, it would be to the Adventist church. If I went for my aunt or my uncle, it would be Adventist church. But I grew up generally between that time space to 20 odd in that church. So we do have a little bit of difference in terms of how we look at doctrine and stuff. I, I'm going to look at one thing that is so clear. So I used to celebrate all the high days where you talk about the Old Testament. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of
Mm.
Atonement, um, the that whole thing. We went through it. I lived through it. We didn't celebrate birthdays. We didn't celebrate Christmas. We didn't so there was that stark difference in terms. We didn't necessarily look at the Trinity the way how we look at Trinity in the Adventist Church. We believed
Mhm.
in the three, but not necessarily as the Trinity. So it has been a journey. But I will tell you this: It was very focused on learning the Bible for yourself, learning and writing the
Mm,
scriptures upon your heart, that journey. And I have taken it into this part journey in this, coming back to the Adventist church because attending that church, it was almost mandatory for us to take a Bible and a notebook to church. It wasn't,
mm,
it was scoffed upon if you didn't take a notebook to church because part of it was the process of not only hearing, but the kinesiology of taking your notes and then going back and
yeah.
reviewing and studying. And I mean, the
Mm,
discipline of that is very good. And I think it helps in terms of just one spiritual life and growing. And, you hear something, but you go check it for yourself. You fact check. You're not just
yes.
hearing what the preacher tells you, but the
Mhm.
preacher tells you that it's a guide, but you have that
Yeah.
personal responsibility to go and learn the word for yourself.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that as it has, helped me and still in my journey, not only from even church and spiritual, but just generally. I like to fact check. To just really
Yeah.
go this way, um, in of itself. So I started on Adventist, did the worldwide church, came back into the Adventist church. Um, Actually, when I went back to Jamaica after university, and primarily to, I was searching for a church. And then at that time, the Worldwide Church of God started going through a division. The founder died, and I wanted something. I was like, I didn't want to be a part of a church that if a founder died, it started to go in division. It didn't seem right.
Mm,
And again, research. What does that really say? Are we serving man or am I serving God? Where is it? As it was such a natural transition back into the Adventist church. And I think people hear me say a lot of times when I speak, when I talk about Koto, and I love Koto, um, but if people hear me speak, you'll hear me say, I am not Koto, I am Adventist. Koto is my
mm,
congregation. I am part of the Adventist World Church. And
right.
I stick to that because I never want to be part of an organization that is based on a personality. So if this
Mm,
personality is not there, I can't. No, I should be able to go to my congregation knowing that I'm part of the bigger world church. I'm part of the
right.
bigger church, which is God's church that was ordained, that we're the remnant people, that we have a purpose, that we have prophecy, that we have the truth as we do something, that we have the truth in of itself. So that's what I want to be part of, the church that God had put here, and Sister White and the other predecessors who took us to see the light of where we need to be. So that's part of my journey. I mean, I could talk about so much more, but in essence, that's where I'm coming from to where I am currently as part of the Church of the Oranges.
Awesome. What a beautiful journey. And I love what you mentioned about taking notes and not just listening to a sermon and accepting everything as is, but take a look for yourself in the Word of God to examine the scriptures, just to study for yourself. And there's a quote that I love that says, the job of a pastor is not to tell you what to think, but to make sure that you're thinking, period.
Yes,
And so I love
right.
that concept of reading the Word of God, taking notes, and we're so glad that you're a part of our family at the Church of the Oranges. And I love the point that you made about being a part of the global world church, because we don't just follow a person or a personality, but we are a movement. And so thank you for reiterating that important point.
Thank you.
So, concerning your journey, are there any obstacles or difficulties that you've had to overcome, and any life lessons that you would like to share with our listeners?
Um, I think, you know, when I look at life, not, I understand the concept of compartments, but recognize how intertwined all parts of our lives are. whether it be or spiritual walk or work journey or family, of itself. And when we talk about obstacles, I mean, I could name so many obstacles. Um, but I'll spare the audience going through all the obstacles, and I'll just share with you that failure comes in different packages.
Hmm.
And the way you're grown and the way your upbringing is so important that as you face failure, um, that you can manage it and you can overcome it and that you can keep your mental health together. We talk about a lot of mental health in today's society. And I think the failure of mental health is the fact that we have failed to put some stuff in perspective and
Hmm.
having persons, including myself, really recognize that. And I think your sermon yesterday did wonderful with it in terms of it's who and whose you are. For
Hmm.
years I've been telling my son, like when he goes out in the morning and we pray, and I said, go now and remember whose you are. And that's so important, especially when failure or different things knock at your door. I'm a divorcee. I think by now most people would have recognized that. So, I carried Pierce Maponya for a while. I just, I still carry Maponya. And for me, I'm talking for me personally, um, that was an epic failure because I
Hmm.
couldn't imagine it. But there's especially it was an epic failure at the point where my son was less than 8 weeks old, 6 weeks old.
Hmm.
I had a brand new baby
Hmm.
and going through the trauma of that, the postpartum situation,
Yeah.
and then now to be dealing with a marriage that from out of the blue, you wonder what's going on. So for me personally, that was mentally challenging and
Hmm.
an epic failure. Um, it took me a while to get to the point where I could speak to it being where my challenge. However, and I'm raising this tonight because I know in our church we have stigma. And I
Hmm.
know in our church, we have a challenge with single parents, whether or not we want to admit it, whether or not we want
Hmm.
to talk about it. So I'm taking the opportunity to use this platform to raise the fact that my divorce was an epic failure for me. But how did my church help me through that is another
Hmm.
story. All
Hmm.
right. How did the church help me not to feel as if I was not an epic failure, that it could be that it was part of God's plan.
Hmm.
And how can I turn that to be a strength for not only myself, but for other women in the church, other men in the church, because men go through pain too, whether or not we
Yeah.
want to accept that in of itself. But how did I get through it? When we say, but God, it was God, because every step of the way, um, he always provided either the person or the resource or
Hmm.
whatever it meant that I needed to be able to survive, but more than to survive, but to start thriving again.
Hmm.
All right. So, in terms of an obstacle, I think that was one of my many obstacles. How do I grow a boy child without a male figure, um, without rushing into another relationship to say, I need a relationship because I have a child or what, or I need a role model. And it comes to the point where, you choose. You're like, do I have a relationship that maybe you're not, because, healing takes time. Do I run
Hmm.
into one and then go back through a cycle, or start a cycle, not go back, but start a cycle? Or do I relax, ask God for his guidance and say, can I be the best mother? Because another thing, I'm not a mother and father. I am
Hmm.
the best mother I can be, recognizing that. And I try to teach my son, your father is not physically, and stuff there. However, I will be the best mother I can be to you. I don't know the role of a male because I am not a male, but I will expose you as much as I can. The question I ask is how much will our church fill in the gap for that? You know,
Mm,
what can the church do for children of divorce? Not only
mm,
from a female perspective, but a male perspective. What can, because there are men out there who have gone through divorce. What can they do? How can you help us, you know, understand that God loves us too? And it's not, we're not necessarily shunned or there's no programming for us. So family life
mm,
is not based on only the married couple or the single, because single does not understand the journey of a divorce.
mm,
Even though the divorced is single, it's not the same journey. So, but as I said, how did get over it? Really, it's family support, it's the friends, and it's God. God knows. I turn to Him. I believe in Him. I really believe in Him as my Father. I believe in Him as my friend. I believe in Him as my waymaker. I really, and I can't get granular, but there's so many instances when I can say that was God. That
mm,
was him. I know he kept me safe. He kept me safe as the mother of the house with a 6-year old that they broke into the house while we were sleeping and
mm.
actually used a substance to keep us sleeping. And we got up and we could see my laptop was gone. Stuff happened. I'm like, how would I have fought this person off
Mm,
if they had come in? You know, just different things. We were at church one Sabbath and they called to say, you got to come home. I didn't even know the call was going to be. I have a very bad habit that, like, I'll put my phone away on Sabbath and just throw it down like I'm not answering anything. And we're at church and they're trying to reach me and they couldn't reach me. And eventually I realized my phone was blowing up. And what's that? They're calling to tell me that there was an attempt breaking in my house that Sabbath. And that's a
wow.
Sabbath before I left to come to the States. Um,
Wow.
and we're like, God, you are, but just the timings and just different things. You're like, oh, but this is God, you know. And my life hasn't been perfect. There are days when, in the past, where I've had questionable financial days as a single parent, and guess what? He has come true.
Mm,
So, um, just trusting and believing and asking him to really keep his wings has been a blessing on our lives. And I'm here, and yeah, my son is 17, and I can't believe it's an
mm.
empty nest in a year. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony and for sharing um, a lot of your pain points and expressing the need for more support for people who travel that journey as well. And we need to stop with the stigmas. People go through things, people are humans. And just because you love God doesn't mean you don't go through certain experiences. And we need to do a better job of not labeling people, but instead showing love and supporting people in their journey, no matter what is going on in their lives. And so we affirm you and thank you for exhibiting courage and strength and faith. And you've raised a wonderful, wonderful son. So shout out to
Thank
you.
you.
And we appreciate you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So when it comes to the heart of Valencia Fierce and some of her passions and experiences and goals, I know that you are in the financial sector. What are some of your passions? What are some of the things that make you excited and that drive you to continue to inspire other people?
Do we have enough time? I'm just
Yeah,
joking.
we do.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I,
Go ahead.
I'm just telling. Um, Let me start off with the lighter side, the hobby side, what's my hobby and stuff. I love to travel. I like to learn about cultures and people and I laugh and talk about people watching. I can just sit there and just watch people go by and almost tell their life story by just how they're walking or what's been said or who is with who or um so the sociology of that gets me always going. Even when I come to church on the oranges, sometimes I sit there in the pews and I watch and I see the outfits and I see and I'm like, okay. So I really like that part in terms of people and just,
Mhm,
experiencing what God has created. I've
mhm.
been to, I've not been to Asia, but I've been to every other continent. And
Nice.
I plan on doing that. And COVID kind of slowed me down a little bit, roll my boat. But I really love to just immerse myself
Travel.
in travel and culture. Um,
Mm,
because there's just so much to learn and to learn from
mhm.
people and how they do things and the philosophies. Um, but I also have other passions. I'm I'm a quiet nerd, um, and I can say that now because at one point I'd get offended if you said I was a nerd. But I not really offended, but I like to learn and do stuff. And I have some academic things that I want to complete that I need to complete. I kind of got off my path on my journey for various reasons, but I know I'll get it done. And I have some goals in that aspect to complete. My final degree in of itself, but it's part of the process, so I'll get there. But in terms of finance and people, there's a report that came out about our community being bankrupted by 2053, 2054 if we don't do something differently. And I
Mm,
think it walks right the path of something that for me has always been some a word that I use a lot. It's legacy. What are
mm.
we leaving for children? I've had many a conversations and debates with my mother and even family members because I've always, and my mom is going to listen to this eventually. Don't get, mommy love you and what, but I've always said your children are not your pension.
Mm,
And from the Caribbean, that's a strong statement for Caribbean households because Caribbean people say, my children are my pension. And I'm like, no, we're not. We appreciate you taking care of us and giving us the best, but you need to take the time out and make the effort to prepare your financial life because it is because we are your pension why we are going to be back up in 2053. Don't get me wrong.
mm.
There's a whole history and legacy behind why we are. We know the forces that be and the systemic racism and all
Yeah,
that exists. So we will not I will not remove that, but we still have the opportunity to do some things to change that conversation of what we're
mm,
having. And part of it is, will I take the effort to make myself knowledgeable of what I should be doing? Will I take the effort to do what I should be doing in terms of a simple thing as a will? We don't want to talk
mm.
about it because we're going to cause death on us. No, we're not. We're just taking care of business. We're just
Yeah,
making sure that when you have worked so hard, that the wrong persons don't get hold of what you've worked hard for.
right.
Um, it, it's the if you can do better, then we should be able not to go to the church's benevolent society to bury you. It
Mm,
should be, and these are conversations that I know is tough and some people might not be too happy, but
yeah.
it's conversations that we must have and we must have as a community. So I'm very passionate about how do we do this? How do we do it differently? How do we generate our own income without depending on somebody saying that you have to come to work 9 o'clock and leave at 5? No, we know there are many different jobs and everybody has to do. But even with the job that you have, how do you position yourself with that? How do you ensure that as an immigrant coming to the United States, working so hard after 15, 20, 30 years, you don't know how you're going to retire
Mm,
because they didn't tell you that America is different from home,
mm, mm,
that you don't retire the way here, that you retire home.
right.
Money doesn't, interest rates here is not like what it's home. So in Jamaica, you may talk about, oh, we have 10, 20%, 30% interest rate, whatever Caribbean country you're from. We know that the dollar and the conversion rates and what. But that doesn't work in the United States. These United States, who is going to educate us that that's not how it works? Why do you need to have a RAF? Why do you need to have a retirement account, an individual, if you don't have something through work? Why do you need to maximize that at work? Why don't look at it and don't tell me that you don't have the budget to have life insurance? Because if you don't
Mm,
have the budget for life insurance, what happened to your children if what? Why do we lose the house that you have been living in the last 15 years because somebody dies suddenly and there's no income, but you have paid mortgage forever, but there is nothing there to back up that house to make sure that it passes on to the next generation?
children.
We're
Yeah.
losing our wealth because our properties are being sold at death.
Mm,
So that I'm very passionate about that. Why is it that our children are working at McDonald's and wherever and not having a savings account that will start their lives differently? That at 25 and 30, when they want to get married, they don't have to borrow for the wedding because they have been
mm,
investing over time.
right.
Or how is it that as a community that we speak collaboratively and to say, okay, for every child that comes up in the family, when it's going to be a birthday, you're going to use the birthday present and cut it in two. Half of it is going to go for an investment, and half of it can buy the toys or the clothes or whatever you want to do. But this is what we're going to do to make sure that by the time they get to 18, they don't have to have student loans like everybody else
Mm,
because student loans is a shackle. But if you did that
yeah.
from the birth of the child and you took the 18 years and every birthday and every Christmas, that $50 gift, you put away 25 and you use 25, it can make a difference. We need to look at
Yeah.
numbers differently. And I'm not speaking in a fairy tale world. I'm speaking something that math, numbers don't lie, and proven that we can do it. But we just have to open ourselves to knowing that we can, well, want to accept that we should be doing it differently, and then say, how can we do it differently? And then
Mhm.
after that, say, can you help me to do it differently? Because that's another thing. We all think that we know, but we're like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an infectious disease doctor, so I can't do what Dr. Greaves do. But you know what? Somebody else does something else. But how can we? I was listening to a rabbi speaking, and he says one of the things in the Jewish community is that they all respect their roles. It's not as if he couldn't
Mm,
fix his car on the weekend or mow his lawn, but his time is to do what he does and make the money. And then
right.
he hires his other Jewish kid to come and mow the lawn,
Mm,
and it circles,
yeah, in their
right,
community. Yeah.
in their community. And on top of it, they end up saying, all right, this person is going to school or this person's getting married. Here is the deposit for your first home.
Wow.
Why can't
Wow.
we have aunties and uncles and cousins and what? So if everybody chipped in and said, okay, let's put $100, something, it may not be a 5% deposit on a house, but it or 10%, but it maybe could be the 2% deposit on a starter home, much
Mm,
different than paying rent. So I use these examples to talk about the passion about financial literacy, where we are, how we can do it differently. And it's not about saying getting rich. It's about taking care of business. Let's just
mhm.
take care of business, and then we can talk about rich afterwards. But let's take care of business as it is day to day. The stock market, I say to our community, Savings is not going to get us where we want to go. It has never
Mm,
done that. It will never do that. Savings is the starter process, but it's not the only process. You have to take it another level. You have to invest, right? And there are only two primary wealth builders in these United States: investments, the stock market, and real estate.
mhm,
If you're not in one of those two, you're not really doing anything for yourself. If you're
mm,
talking about longevity and legacy, all right, and true building of some kind of wealth as it is, because richness is not necessarily wealth, but the freedom and the mental freedom that you can have when you know you have your ducks in order can create so much more for a community. So
yeah.
that's, I could keep going, but Pastor, you know,
Feel free to connect with Valencia. She is a wealth of knowledge on this topic and will be glad to help you plan the legacy for your family. Despite all the obstacles and injustices that we have faced as a people, there are still things that we can do to get ahead and to do better to ensure that those who are coming behind us will be better off and will have no debt and will be better prepared for the future until Jesus returns. So thank you so much for stressing those important points. And I look forward to hearing more on this at our church, more discussions, more opportunities to cultivate that awareness about financial literacy. So thank you so much for sharing this.
oh, no problem. Thank you.
Yes. And so we've truly enjoyed listening to your story. And we thank everyone for listening. And we know that you were inspired just as I was. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Valencia, for sharing. Thank you for lending us your time. And we pray God's continued blessings on all of your endeavors. And we pray that God will continue to open doors of opportunity so that you can continue to be a blessing to other people. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
No problem. Thank you for tuning into the Juice and the Orange podcast, and we will see you next time.